Your storyteller for today is me, Rebecca. I've faced my fair share of difficulties, just like many of you, particularly with my mother-in-law, Emma. She is the type of person who, despite our repeated warnings, loves to take charge and frequently exceeds limits set by my husband, Anthony, and me. Unfortunately, Emma was able to have a big impact on our lives for a while since Anthony and I weren't the best at setting limits. She didn't exactly detest or be nasty to me, but she did find ways to let me know that she wasn't entirely delighted with me. She was not afraid to criticize my personal style, and oddly enough, she also spared her kid from criticism of the same kind. She's done a lot of things without our permission, but our wedding is a particularly notable example. Emma decided to replace everything, including our cake, flowers, and decorations. While we were able to prevent her from altering the location, we were forced to comply with her decisions on everything else or risk losing money. She always claimed to know best and to have greater taste than us, even when questioned. It was annoying and offensive that she showed little respect for our decisions despite having costly taste. For his part, Anthony struggled to resist his mother. He didn't think about breaking up with her, so I did my best to ignore her intrusion. For a while, everything was stable until Emma discovered a new method to force her beliefs on us. Anthony and I finally purchased our dream home after years of saving. I took great effort to decorate it to suit our likes and personality, and it was ideal for us. Emma's response, though, was not quite positive when she saw it. She said it looked cheap and tasteless, criticizing both our choice and the manner we decorated it. She claimed that we should have gotten her opinion, but we made it plain that we were content with our house the way it was and that this was our decision. We refused to back down in the face of her protestations and offers to make changes to our house that she would want. We meant to maintain our house a reflection of ourselves, not hers. My goal in telling this tale is to reach out to anyone who might be experiencing similar difficulties and to vent. It serves as a reminder that, even if we can't always control what other people do, we can always decide how to react and cling on to the things that are significant to us. Emma's constant insistence that we make alterations to our house based on her advice annoyed me. But Anthony and I were determined not to let her get involved this time. We refused to back down in the face of her repeated attempts to influence us through calls, SMS, and unannounced visits. Emma, nevertheless, was never one to give up lightly. She discovered a more devious strategy. After years of accumulating money for our dream home, Anthony and I decided to reward ourselves to a quick trip out of state. We hadn't been able to take a vacation together in a very long time, and because we had some extra cash, this looked like the ideal chance. The plan was for our house to be unoccupied while we were away, but a gracious neighbor who was in his 70s volunteered to keep an eye on it. Not that we were anticipating any problems, but he did pledge to let us know if anything seemed unusual. When he called to tell us that he had seen 4 women enter our home, we were genuinely surprised. We were alarmed and demanded more information. The profile of one woman clearly fit Emma. Anthony and I were both confused and irritated, and we needed to know what was going on. I gave Emma a straight call to confront her. "Emma, what are you doing at our house?" "Our neighbor saw you and some people entering," I replied in disbelief. "Oh, I'll be staying here for 2 weeks with my friends. Just 4 of them. But don't worry, no wild parties or anything. We thought it would be nice to spend some quality time together. Plus, your house could use some looking after. Think of it as a house sitting for you, but we're not even home. Why would you bring your friends over without us being there?" I responded with confusion. "Don't fret. I'll entertain them. And with the recent break-ins around your neighborhood, consider this as us keeping your place secure. It's better this way, especially considering all the valuables you and Anthony have. We wouldn't want anything to go missing, now would we?" Emma argued. Emma's explanation appeared to have merit, but the way she presented it was blatantly intrusive and uninvited. It brought to light another incident of her overstepping her bounds, albeit this time in the name of worry and protection for our new residents. Throughout our chat, Emma's tone made me feel uncomfortable and extremely suspicious. Her trite reference to house sitting seemed a little too easy, as though she had planned this visit long in advance. There were a few things that bothered me about her unexpected visit with friends, even though she was aware that we weren't home. It seemed like she had entered our house with her key, and I feared to think what would have occurred if our neighbor hadn't seen and let us know right away. Though I appreciated his attention to detail, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that my appreciation came too soon. I told Anthony about my worries and how uneasy I felt that Emma was inviting strangers into our house. I couldn't help but feel uneasy about it and find it difficult to comprehend her intentions. Anthony was unfazed and even thought it was lucky that someone was watching over our house because it may discourage burglaries. But I was concerned about more than just possible theft. Our interactions with Emma had shown us that she had a history of pushing boundaries, and this seemed like just another obvious example. Anthony attempted to comfort me by proposing that we talk to Emma about the matter when we got back home. He realized that, in light of his mother's recent behavior, he had to stop being reluctant to face her. Even though I understood Anthony's struggle and that Emma had raised him alone, my anxiety persisted despite Anthony's determination. The next day, when our neighbor called, my nervousness increased. He asked whether we were still on vacation, so I told him about Emma and her pals staying at our house while we were away, claiming to be protecting it. The next words he spoke chilled us. He claimed to have heard a lot of commotion coming from our house, noises more comparable to renovations than the normal sounds of occupants. Anthony and I were dumbfounded by this shocking revelation, wondering how much Emma had been doing without us. The scenario was getting scarier by the moment, contradicting our first impressions and making us face the possibility of what we would discover when we got back. Everything fell into place when our neighbor revealed it. My mother-in-law, Emma, had made no secret of her contempt for my lackluster attempts at home decor, calling them distasteful and demanding her own expert advice on how to make our house seem better. Her abrupt stop complaining after hearing about our little vacation suddenly rang true with dire warning. Anthony made assumptions about the sound's nature and wondered whether there might have been a miscommunication. Any suspicions were addressed, nevertheless, by the neighbor's views of delivery of interior design and by seeing Emma and her companions actively involved in these improvements. The information that confirmed our concerns was that one of Emma's friends was a well-known interior decorator. It broke our hearts to think that Emma had decided to renovate the interior of our house without asking permission. Anthony and I were both in shock and terror, trying to process the truth of her unwanted visits. We thanked the neighbor for his watchfulness and made it clear that Emma had not been given permission to do what she had done, emphasizing how dangerous the situation was. I was unable to enjoy the vacation any longer due to the betrayal, and I proclaimed it over due to frustration and the pressing need to step in. Anthony apologized for his mother's irresponsible behavior and expressed sympathy for my pain. Perplexed by her choice to enlist people in this unnecessary undertaking, and with nowhere else to turn to save Emma's ambitions before more harm was done, I considered calling the police. Anthony found it upsetting to consider calling the police on Emma, but our concerns were surpassed by the urgency of the situation. After gaining Anthony's grudging approval, I went ahead and asked the police to do a welfare check, referencing our neighbor's reports of continuous, inexplicable disruptions at our house. Even though it was a severe measure, it seemed like the only way to protect our house from more unauthorized changes. I told the police that my mother-in-law and a few visitors were staying at our house, but I did not reveal my suspicions. The police investigated my welfare check and took my worries seriously, considering the recent surge in crimes. The officers' reaction was surprising in the extreme. They said our house was in disarray and that there was continuous demolition going on, generating dust and damage all over the place. My well-selected decorations were either lost or misplaced, which is evidence of our disdain for our possessions. When they got home, the situation was just as horrible as the cops had said it would be. The pictures they posted showed just how much damage was done while we were away. This scene overwhelmed me so much that I was distraught. Having gone through a severe emotional breakdown, Anthony was furious, but he was also cool enough to go to the police straight. He was very evident that his mother had gone too far, making improvements without our consent and causing a great deal of harm. The officers present expressed empathy for our situation and recognized the financial and psychological consequences of the unapproved changes. Anthony and I decided that we wanted to hold Emma responsible for her conduct when it came to filing charges for property destruction. The police promised to give more proof of the damage and were helpful in starting the legal process on our behalf. We made plans for my sister to take care of the house until we could go back in the interim. Anthony assumed responsibility and made sure his mother was held accountable for her carelessness. In spite of my agitated state, in which I was cursing Emma mercilessly, Anthony handled the matter with an almost heroic degree of composure and decisiveness. He quickly booked our flights back, wanting to deal with the fallout from Emma's invasion as soon as possible. Our first priorities were to make things right and start putting the pieces of what had been ruthlessly destroyed back together. Anthony and I did not take our time. When we got back to our hometown, we went immediately to the police station to file an official complaint about Emma's unpermitted home renovations. We showed the officers pictures of our house in its original condition in addition to the destruction Emma had caused. The officers recommended that we take legal action for the chaos caused, clearly horrified by the magnitude of the destruction. My rage and frustration finally got the better of me. I was going to make sure Emma paid a heavy price for what she had done. We needed to confront her and make her realize the seriousness of what she had done, so we went to the police station where she was being detained. Emma's reaction, when she saw us, was one of pretense and perplexity. She asked why she was in jail, as though she had no idea how much destruction she had brought about. It was frustrating to see her lack of regret and her constant conviction that forcing her taste into our house was only helping us. Anthony was just as furious and took her illusion head-on, questioning her boldness and disrespect for our property and wishes. Emma's entitlement-based defense claimed that her goals were to improve our house, completely unaware of the emotional and financial misery she had brought about. Unaware of the gravity of her actions, she ventured to criticize my preferences and offered to make all the necessary corrections if let go. But we were uncompromising in our resolve. We told her that we were going to file charges for property destruction and that she was never to come near our house again. When Emma saw our stance's resolve, it seemed to finally hit her that there would be legal repercussions. When panic struck, she ran to Anthony and begged for his help while trying to paint me as the bad guy for demanding responsibility. Nevertheless, her request was ignored. Together, we made the decision to carry the legal procedure through to the end so Emma would have to deal with the consequences of her unauthorized entry into and modification of our house. Emma's realization of the truth about her circumstances was a turning point in our resistance to her intrusive and controlling actions. Anthony wholeheartedly agreed with my position. "You've repeatedly crossed our boundaries, Emma, and Mom Rebecca is right when she says that you've transformed our house to suit your tastes." He firmly said that this was a step too far, emphasizing the betrayal of respect and trust that had taken place. Anthony refused to back down in the face of Emma's objections and her attempts to persuade him with sentimental pleas. He emphasized the severe financial ramifications and the need for reparation for the enormous harm she caused. Emma lost it as she realized how her actions actually affected her. She had not budgeted for the litigation or the substantial dent it would make in her money. Her weeping and cries for forgiveness were a far cry from her entitled ways. Her assertion of financial difficulty, however, had no effect on our choice. "You should have considered the consequences before undertaking such drastic actions," we replied. Cloaked in good intentions, her pleas for leniency were turned down. Anthony and I were able to see through the facade and identify it as just another deceptive strategy. We were resolute. Emma apologized profusely and expressed regret at the last minute, but the damage to our house and confidence was beyond repair. After dropping her up at the police station, we made our way home, determined to put the chaos she had caused behind us. The fact that Emma was freed on bond and then made an unexpected visit to our house confirmed our choice. Anthony outlined our limits once more and insisted that we not communicate with one another. Emma's frantic attempts to win back our favor just served to highlight how important it was that we set these limits and held her responsible. We aimed to prevent more turbulence from affecting our house, our tranquility, and our future. Anthony and I made the decision to stay in our damaged but still livable home in spite of the unrest. We waited for compensation through the judicial system. In the end, the court decided in our favor, requiring Emma to pay us a substantial settlement. She just avoided jail time, but she was also mandated to pay our attorney's fees. The judge was very outspoken in his disapproval for her acts, which brought Emma to tears once more. But our compassion for her had long since worn out. All she was doing was dealing with the fallout from her deeds. Emma's circle of acquaintances, including those she had enlisted in her scheme, quickly withdrew themselves from her, not wanting to be linked with her foolishness. Observing the ruling of the court, Emma came up to us in tears, pleading for forgiveness and complaining about how her financial situation had become worse since Anthony had stopped giving her the additional money. After years of paying his mother a hefty allowance, Anthony made the decision to stop because of his mother's destructive behavior and ensuing legal issues. We were unmoved by Emma's cries for help, which highlighted her terrible financial situation. Firm in his commitment, Anthony underlined the significance of accepting responsibility for one's conduct and pointed out that her entitlement had required this severe lesson. Emma categorically refused her offer to move into our guest room as a way to patch things up and maybe even get our finances back on track. Anthony proposed a period of no communication so that we could heal and reevaluate her role, if any, in our lives. Anthony made it obvious that she was no longer wanted in our home or life. Emma's stunned and desperate response to Anthony's posture resulted in a moving scene outside our door. But, having seen her deceptive ways with our own eyes, we stood firm in our decision to break things up, even in the face of her weeping. In the months that followed, we had a sense of renewed tranquility. Anthony and I were able to embrace a more carefree and optimistic attitude on life because Emma's critical presence was no longer there. We are considering keeping this distance indefinitely in the hopes of a future devoid of conflict and meddling as a result of this experience. In the hopes that this choice will result in the happy existence we've always imagined, we look for guidance and compassion as we travel through this process.